Hey guys, back with another video. Not an impressions video this time, underrated games video. This is going to be in two parts, I think. I've got a list of about, I think, 10 games here. The video would go on too long if I talked about all of them in one video, but this was suggested by a viewer a couple of videos back, and I thought it would be a good thing to do. I know a lot of people do these types of videos, and I did one kind of similar, games that people hate that I really enjoyed. But I don't think those games would be considered underrated. I think underrated games are kind of the games that I think a lot of people like, but just like not like some people may have not heard of them. Not many people give them a shot, and they kind of flew under the radar when they got released. So yeah, I mean, with the internet now, I think a lot of people will have heard of these games, but maybe have not tried them. I thought I'd give my opinions on some of these games. But yeah, let's get right into it with the first game, which is Breakdown on the Xbox. Unfortunately, only for the Xbox. And the original Xbox, I've said before, it was my main system for that console generation. I had the GameCube for most of that generation. PS2, I didn't delve too much into. That I'm getting around to now, but the Xbox was the main system, and I think the Xbox gets a lot of flack for having like a lot of shooters, but I think if you dig a little deeper, you can find some really great games on that system that aren't like the typical shooter. I think there are a lot of underrated games on that system. There's a lot of shit on it too, but there's certainly some underrated games there, and Breakdown is one of those games. I do wish this was on other systems because you're going to need an Xbox to play this. I don't know if it's backwards compatible on the 360. It might be. See, I don't know. I hope so. But this game came out in 2004. I remember renting it. I never did own it, and I actually haven't beaten it. It's a game I'd like to play again. But it was really unique for the time. This game basically developed by Namco, and it was entirely first person. So this was before Mirror's Edge, much before Mirror's Edge, and it was basically a first-person hand-to-hand combat game. That was like the main portion of the game, and it had a really deep, involved hand-to-hand combat system that felt like almost like a fighting game. You'd kind of learn combos, and they were very hard to pull off. You had these massive combos, and the combat just really felt good. Like the combat was excellent in this game as far as like the hand-to-hand stuff goes, and there's like a cool upgrade system. But that wasn't all there was to the game. You had first-person shooting sequences as well, which were probably the weaker aspect of the game. You had this very forgiving, like, auto lock-on system, which you pretty much had to have because the aiming was definitely not great. You also had first-person platforming, which has never been great in games. And there's a few sections in this game I remember, these like giant towers that you have to like go up. And those platforming sections were very annoying. This is definitely a flawed game, don't get me wrong, which is why I think it's kind of underrated. And I don't think too many people have played this one. So yeah, there's definitely some flaws here. One of my favorite parts of the game, though, is the story. It's very over the top and weird. It definitely gets batshit insane towards the end, but it's enjoyable in that like super over the top Japanese kind of way. You've got a lot of like tropes and things like that. Like your character has amnesia in the beginning, but I don't know. I thought the story was really compelling. The characters I thought were great. Visually, I think it still holds up quite well. Yeah, the controls will take a while to get used to. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and it's definitely a bit of a novelty, being entirely first person. I remember, like, to increase your health and whatnot, you had to like eat like chocolate bars and things like that, and rations, and you'd like drink sodas, and it was all entirely in first person. There's like a first person puking sequence. It was a really bizarre game, but I thought it was really compelling. The reason I never beat it though. Towards the end, there's like this massive gauntlet of enemies. It's like a 5-wave battle where each wave has progressively more and harder enemies, and this section was ridiculously difficult. I could never do it. I tried so many times, and I couldn't do it before I had to give the game back to Blockbuster. So I didn't actually get to see the final boss or how the game ends up. Well, I think I did eventually watch like how the story ended. But definitely a game I'd like to play again, and it's really cheap. You can find this game for like less than $10. like complete. So if you have an Xbox or 360, I definitely try to recommend seeking this game out. I thought it was really enjoyable despite its many flaws. The next game is Shining Force 3 for the Sega Saturn. Now, I know in North America we only got the first part. There's 3 parts of this game, and to get the full story you have to play all 3. Unfortunately, we never got the second and third parts here in North America. I know there's like translations for them, but I still need to actually get into those. But I have played the first part, and even just playing the first part, I think as far as Saturn RPGs go, I think this is like, I mean, I think the Saturn is like full of underrated games in general. Even some RPGs, some like I haven't played, like Albert Odyssey, and then Dragon Force, which I think is another underrated RPG on that system. But people always bring up Panzer Dragoon Saga. Panzer Dragoon Saga, that's like the best RPG ever, masterpiece. And you know, I actually kind of think that game's a bit overrated. Certainly not worth like the $280 or whatever it goes for. I don't know. Something about that game just like rubbed me the wrong way. Like I didn't really get into the storyline. I mean, the combat's pretty cool, but and it's got a great atmosphere and music. But I don't know. Like there really wasn't much to that game. Like it was. I don't know. I don't know. And it was weird too because I played Shining Force 3 and then Panzer Dragoon Saga afterwards, and I was just like, man, like Shining Force 3 is a much more enjoyable game. Now, I've been a fan of the Shining Force series for a while. The first 2 games I think are fantastic, and I think this game is almost just as good. I mean, in a way, it can be kind of simple. You're basically just going from battle to battle, but the actual like strategy battles are just really fun. They're not like super challenging. Like they're just I don't know, just right for me as someone that's like not crazy about strategy RPGs and that's really bad at them. I thought the difficulty in this game was just right. A really engrossing story that I wish I could have seen more of because the ending they had for this version of the game was kind of lackluster. And I really do wish we got those last 2 parts. You know, a great cast of characters. Some great RPG elements, very addictive too. Like I found myself wanting to do one more battle. I think the only thing I didn't really like about it was like the final level. I thought that was really tedious. But I mean, other than that, I don't know. I found myself really captivated by this game. And you know, as far as RPGs go on the Saturn, I think it's probably the most underrated one. Although mainly a lot of that has to do with the fact that like Panzer Dragoon Saga, like so many people think that game's a masterpiece and it's like the best RPG on the Saturn, one of the best RPGs of all time. And I don't know, I always kind of preferred Shining Force 3. And I think the series in general is kind of underrated as far as like strategy RPGs go. I think like really hardcore players of this genre that want like extremely deep strategy RPG elements might be disappointed with the series or might not like it. But for someone like me, I really get into them. It's probably my favorite franchise on like a Sega console, actually. But yeah, not much to say about Shining Force 3. I mean, the prices are very high for this game. I think it's like at least $100 for a complete copy. But I don't know. If you can find a way to play this game, I definitely recommend it. I mean, I paid like around $100 for it, and I didn't feel ripped off in any way. Whereas Panzer Dragoon Saga, like I sold that game like almost like a few months after I completed it. Like that game was like an 11-hour game, and I don't know, I thought it was okay, but it didn't really blow my mind. I felt like I wasted my money on that game, whereas Shining Force 3, I feel like I didn't really waste my money. But yeah, if you can find a way to play it, I definitely highly recommend it. Unless you haven't played the first 2 games, then go ahead and play those because those are fantastic as well. But yeah, Shining Force 3, really, really enjoyed it. Okay, this next game, I've talked about this before. I'm always going to bring this up when I talk about like underrated games or games that I think more people should play. Jet Force Gemini on the N64. Now, I know the N64 is a console that hasn't held up too well over the years. A lot of the games are ugly. The controller makes a lot of the games hard to play, including Jet Force Gemini. But I think there are some games on that system that are still underrated. Of course, I think anything like not made by Nintendo and Rare are kind of don't hold up so well. Ogre Battle 64, I think, is easily the best game on the system. But Jet Force Gemini, like I find people always dismiss this game, even among Rare's games on the system. Like even people that love the N64, you know, you'll always hear, you know, GoldenEye, Conker's Bad Fur Day, Donkey Kong 64. I'd argue all three of those games are extremely outdated and hard to play today, especially Donkey Kong 64. Fuck that game. God, I hate that game. But like Conker's Bad Fur Day, I loved it when it came out. But playing that again fairly recently, like that game is like from a design standpoint is really kind of bad. It's really tedious and just like, ugh, just I don't know, man. GoldenEye I find it very hard to go back to due to the controls and just how much like first-person shooters have progressed. Perfect Dark, on the other hand, I do think that game holds up a bit better. Blast Corps is a game that I know is apparently pretty good. I never played it. I still haven't played it. That's probably another underrated game. But I don't know, Force Gemini, I never hear people talk about it as far as Rare games. I think it holds up a bit better. Okay, maybe I'm crazy here. Maybe it's just the nostalgia is too much for me with this game. I can't see past it. I mean, it's. I think the biggest hurdle with this game is the controls. You know, the N64 controller is hard to deal with these days, and I think this game would be. I just wish they do like some kind of HD remake. You know, with like on the well, I guess they can't do it because Rare's on like Microsoft owns Rare now. They'd have to do it on the Xbox One, unfortunately. But I don't know. I still think this game is really unique among the N64's library. Obviously known for a lot of 3D platformers. This game has elements of that, but it also has like third-person shooting. Like that's the main portion of the game. But yeah, I mean, it's got elements of a collectathon. You collect a lot of doodads and things like that, but you're constantly upgrading your characters and finding new weapons and upgrades for those weapons and health power-ups. I love the environments where you kind of use your spaceship to travel to these different planets. And the game's kind of got like a Metroidvania feel where certain sections of these planets will be blocked off and you're not sure how to access them. And then later in the game, you'll get new abilities which will allow you to backtrack to those planets and find new areas. The boss battles are really intense. This game's difficult. It will provide a great challenge. The final boss in particular, I think, is very difficult. It's just, I don't know, it's the explorative nature of this game I really liked. The music is really like bombastic, like the game, I just love like the space setting this game has. The game's maybe a bit too on like the cutesy side, and the visuals probably don't hold up too well, like a lot of N64 games, but I don't know, I think as far as Rare's games on the N64, this game is probably one of the ones that holds up best, along with like Banjo-Kazooie and Perfect Dark, I guess, to an extent. Probably Blast Corps, but I haven't really played it. So yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those games that I think, even though I love it and I can still go back to it these days, the N64 controller might, like some people probably are just not going to get over that. But I really think once you get over that learning curve, it becomes really fun. Yes, it has like some platforming too. It's just it takes all these elements from different games and kind of, I don't know, it feels fresh to me and unique, other than like Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day and Donkey Kong 64, which were all just, you know, standard 3D platformers with maybe some few new elements added. But this game was something else, I thought. And I still have a good time going back to it. But yeah, maybe it's nostalgia, but I thought I'd bring it up just once more. I don't think I'm going to be talking about this game anymore. I think I've given the game its due. I know I was like listening to a podcast recently talking about Rare, and then they bring up all of their games and, you know, oh, this game's excellent, GoldenEye great, Perfect Dark great, Conker's Bad Fur Day great, and then they get to Force Gemini, it's like, oh, that game was bad, or without even having played it. Like I think one of the people on the podcast was like, oh yeah, I heard that game is terrible. I think it was one of they're considered one of their weaker efforts on the N64. I'm just like, what? Like, I don't know, I feel just people dismiss this game without actually playing it and just say, like, it's crap compared to Rare's other games. But I don't know, on the contrary, I think it's honestly one of their best. But yeah, maybe nostalgia. But yeah, Force Gemini. Okay, the next game is another Xbox game, another underrated game on that system. Jet Set Radio Future. Now, this, honestly, I think this is probably my favorite Xbox game. I remember getting this. This was like when I first got the Xbox. I didn't get it when it came out, but I got it a few years later. It came with Halo, of course, and the Sega GT / Jet Set Radio Future bundle. I remember going through Halo, playing that campaign with my brother. I loved that game. It was, new at the time. I don't know. I don't like Halo so much anymore, or first-person shooters in general, really. But at the time, I really loved it. However, Jet Set Radio Future was the game I kept coming back to. I loved that game. In fact, I almost 100%ed it. Like, I almost got all the characters. I played it a few times since then, and I love it just as much as I did back in the day. And I know this game, again, gets some weird, I don't know, this game gets some weird hate to me. There's quite a few people who prefer Jet Grind Radio to this game, and I'm sorry, I will never comprehend that. The only reasons I can think of are nostalgia, and people that just simply like the arcadey nature of the first game better, which I guess I can sort of understand that, but I hate Jet Grind Radio. I can't stand that game. I think like the time limits for that game are ridiculously strict, and it's I don't know, you can't really be creative in that game. Like it's just I don't know. I found it like the challenge level was like I don't know. That game was just frustrating to play. Like the controls were just needlessly complicated. I hated the tagging in that game. I thought it was needlessly complex. I don't know. I cannot stand Jet Grind Radio. So it was just a big surprise to have Jet Set Radio Future, which I think, in terms of a sequel, fixes everything about the first game. It just fixes the first game in every single way. To me, this is how you do a sequel. Jet Set Radio Future. Gone is that arcadey nature, level by level feel, where in this game you have an open world with interconnected levels and objectives in each level. Gone are I think there are some time limits, but Gone is the entire game being based around time limits. You're free to explore, and these environments are very intricate. Really fun skating around these environments. Tagging was streamlined, but it was still enjoyable. A huge cast of interesting, quirky characters, and I loved unlocking new characters because each character was so different from one another. The soundtrack was just as good as the first one. I thought the soundtrack was just insanely awesome and fits the style of the game. The cel-shaded visuals hold up perfectly. And I think this game, it's very cheap too, at least if you're going for that Sega GT bundle. And for some strange reason, well, I guess it's not too strange. The standalone version of this game is actually one of the more expensive Xbox One games. I don't think it's actually too expensive, but I think it's like $40 or something like that. It might have gone up since the last time I've checked, but even for that, it's worth it. Because yeah, I think this is easily the best game on the system. Tons of replay value. Very challenging when you're going for that 100% and trying to unlock all the characters. So, I mean, some people think this game just lacks challenge compared to the first game. Maybe in terms of the main game, but I don't know. I thought this game was a blast. There's multiplayer that was still, well, it was okay. The multiplayer was okay. I had some fun with it back in the day. Not sure it would be that fun anymore. I think it was 2-player split screen. Yeah, visuals are fantastic. Style's fantastic. The story is really goofy and over the top. The game's got a great sense of humor to it. I don't know. It's just one of those underrated games. It sold like shit when it came out, from what I can remember, and I don't know. It doesn't. It's not held in the same regard as Jet Grind Radio, and I don't know. That really baffles me. When in my opinion, this game is just way better than that. I think it's just kind of unfortunate. I think it's purely because it was on the Xbox. Not too many people got to play it. But yeah, I definitely strongly urge people to check this game out. I think it is actually playable on the 360. I think there's some frame rate issues, but from what I understand, they're kind of minor. But yeah, fantastic game. Okay, the next game is a PS1 game, Incredible Crisis. I think a few people have probably heard of this game. I'm surprised this game even came out in North America. It's basically a mini-game compilation, but this game is absurd. It is over the top, it's goofy, it's hilarious, super Japanese. In fact, you play as a Japanese family, and they have all these wacky adventures, and it's basically a bunch of mini games strung together, and they're extremely wacky. The cutscenes in this game are hilarious. It's just one of those games I think everyone should experience. It's certainly flawed. I think the game is way too fucking hard. I can get maybe halfway through this game. Like the mini games in this game are they take a lot of trial and error. You can't like it's very easy to fail these mini games. A lot of them you have to like mash buttons really hard. The timing for a lot of them is very strict. So it's going to take some patience to see everything this game has to offer. And you know, like I said, I got to maybe halfway through the game. I kind of YouTubed like the rest because I forget what minigame. There's some minigame I got to that I couldn't do. I just could not do it, which kind of a shame. I think it's kind of a game that's fun to play with other people where you like kind of like pass the controller and see if you can get through the minigame. It's very intense though. It's certainly challenging and intense, but I think some people are just not going to be able to get over the difficulty. I think the interesting thing with this game though is how unique it is. To me, it's kind of like the precursor to the WarioWare games, which I find kind of interesting. You know, it's got this kind of like cel-shaded look to it that I think holds up quite well. I don't think it's too expensive. It could be, because I think it's kind of sort of like a cult classic nowadays, but definitely one of the more interesting games on the PS1. I guess there's really not too much to say about it. At its core, it's a very simple game, but it's certainly a fun time. So definitely check it out if you haven't heard of it. And I think it's worth the purchase, as long as it's not too expensive. It might be high. It might be up there now, though. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that. All right, the next game is 13. Now this was on the PS2, GameCube, Xbox, PC. It was on a lot of things, and this is a first-person shooter that I actually think is underrated. I remember being extremely hyped for this game on release, and it sold like shit, apparently. Developed by Ubisoft, and it was unique at the time for being like, I think it was like the first cel-shaded first-person shooter. We've had a few of them now, or at least since then, but this was definitely the first one. It was based on like a graphic novel, so it had that comic book style where sometimes you'd kill enemies and you had like a 3-panel comic book type thing in the top left of the screen showing like their death, which was kind of cool. Like the game just had a really great style to it. The gunplay was kind of generic. You had some like stealth sections that were actually kind of annoying. The guns were very basic. Like shooting felt like the gunplay felt fine, but it was nothing mind blowing. The levels were nice and varied, but the story is what grabbed me with this game. You play as an amnesiac, which okay, yeah, not very original, but you're kind of trying to get your identity back, and you're accused of killing the President of the United States. And that's all I really want to say, but the story is full of really cool twists. I was always engaged. I always like these kind of crime stories. Unfortunately, though, the game had a cliffhanger ending. They were planning to do some sequel, which was that bites because there hasn't been a sequel. There really hasn't, because the game sold like shit. There's really not too much to say about this game. I think, though, it's just a really solid first-person shooter that I don't see too many people talk about. And, you know, even though I'm not crazy about first-person shooters these days, I would like to go back and play this one. Maybe it hasn't held up too well, but I think the story is good enough that I think people are going to be able to enjoy this game and get through it. But yeah, not much to say on this game. It's super cheap, though. You can easily grab a copy of this game for, I want to say, even less than $5. Like, it's dirt cheap. Okay, guys, that's it for this first part. I guess an honorable mention, though. You know, ever since Bloodborne released, I've been reading a lot of message boards and listening to a lot of like podcasts. And I almost want to do some kind of video, like an in defense of Dark Souls 2 video, because I swear the hyperbole surrounding this Dark Souls 2 is ridiculous. The way so many people talk about this game, you'd think it was an absolute travesty. Like it was like this blight on the series, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Like I was listening to 8-4-Play podcast, which is a podcast I really like, and they were talking about Bloodborne. Like it was like 90 minutes of Bloodborne, and the way they talked about Dark Souls 2, I was just like, wow. It's like all these like really these like complaints that to me felt so nitpicky, and just I don't know, like the way they talked about that game, I don't know. I know opinions, but like I feel that game is way too overhated. At this point, I feel like that game is underrated. I mean, I think a lot of people, though, are just like comparing it to Dark Souls or whatever. And it's like, yeah, sure, it's not Dark Souls, but I think in its own right, it's a damn amazing game. I'm really excited to play this new version that's coming out soon. But I don't know, like all the hate surrounding that game, I think it's really weird. Like, especially since when that game came out, everyone was loving it, and then a YouTuber by the name of Matthew Matosis, which I love his videos, but he did a Dark Souls 2 critique, and like a lot of his complaints were super nitpicky. And ever since that video came out, everyone is all of a sudden completely agreeing with him, and all of a sudden Dark Souls 2 is like this bad game. I don't know. It's like all these people that were like saying this game was amazing, like when they're first playing it, all of a sudden, oh wait, no, it's shitty. I don't know, man. I think that game is just like the hate surrounding that game is absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, and more so now with Bloodborne out. Now people are just like hating on it even more. It's ridiculous. Especially since like Bloodborne, I love Bloodborne. Don't get me wrong. I think that game is fantastic, game of the year. But I think that game is very flawed. I mean, I didn't talk about this in the review, but the Chalice Dungeon part of that game, or at least not too much, but the Chalice Dungeon component of that game, I think is garbage. And people are like defending Bloodborne like crazy, but are like not talking about its flaws. But instead, oh no, Dark Souls 2, this bad. I don't know, I'm getting a bit ranty here, but maybe another time for another video. But yeah, Dark Souls 2, throw that on the pile for underrated games. But anyways, guys, we'll see you in part 2 where I'll cover. I think like 5 or 6 more games. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.